So to start the cleaning, the first thing that we always want to do is verify that it's unloaded. So we're going to swing the cylinder out, visually identify that each of the chambers are empty, and it always helps to just touch and make sure you don't feel anything unusual. So this one has been confirmed clear. And with the cylinder swung out like this, we're actually just going to pull the yoke slightly forward. And this one is a little tough from the carbon buildup, but it'll just pop out like that. Now we can easily see that there is a lot of carbon fouling. So that's the first thing that I want to attack with this. This carbon gets caked up and it causes a lot of friction that can cause binding in the mechanisms that could be causing the issues that we're seeing. So we're going to be trying the Modern Spartan Systems Carbon Destroyer. This stuff I've never tried before. This was something that they sent out to me to see how I liked it and see how it performs, but in looking at reviews, this has a really good reputation for just melting the carbon away, so we're going to see if that helps us with our problem. So I've had to switch patch holders, but we're just back with a patch soaked in the Carbon Destroyer now, and all we're going to do is run this down the bore, and the objective here is to just coat the inside of the bore with the Carbon Destroyer and let it work. It's going to take a couple of minutes to start to break down the carbon to the point that we can remove it. Now that this rag is soaked, now these are safe for human use, so you don't want to eat it or get it in your eyes or anything, but as far as skin contact, all of the Modern Spartan Systems products are supposed to be safe for regular contact. So I'm just going to reach up and grab this, and with it still soaking wet, I'm just going to apply some of this Carbon Destroyer here. One part of this gun that is surprisingly fouled is the top strap on the inside here. I don't know how well that's coming across on camera, but this is just caked in carbon, so I don't know how many shots have been fired through this gun without cleaning, but I'm going to assume it's a lot. Now the Carbon Destroyer states to apply liberally, so I'm actually just going to take the bottle and drop a little on there and see how that works for us. This is supposed to let stand, not enough to dry, but enough to really start to break that down. And I'm also going to put a little on the breech face here, around the firing pin hole where it's built up, and the edge of the barrel extension. Now that stringiness there shows us that we might have a sharp point of contact on the edge of the barrel, possibly a burr from some kind of damage, so that'll be something to look at when we start examining this gun more closely. Also tons of carbon fouling on the face of the cylinder. This is where the gases escape from the bullet, where it's not completely sealed between the cylinder and the barrel, so it would be normal to expect deposits here. And on each of the flutes as well. Drop a little more on there. Again, I don't really know exactly how much is needed for this product, so we're experimenting here as much as we are cleaning. And already this stuff that's built up, I'm starting to see it wipe away just with the cleaning cloth as I'm applying the solvent. Another place that we're going to want to check is under the extractor collar. I'm going to push that there, and I'm going to leave in a little drop. I'm going to work it a little bit so that it gets distributed well. And then of course the inside of each of the chambers, if nothing else, a fouled chamber is going to make extraction of fired cases difficult, so we want to leave those clean and nicely lubricated. So I have a newly wetted patch here to attack the inside of each of these chambers. Just going to run it through enough to deposit solvent. And we're going to let that sit a minute. And we're also going to try to get some inside the cylinder stop notches. This is where the cylinder stop will grab the cylinder and hold it in place while it's fired or cocked. Just gonna try to get a little in there. Anywhere that we might see some carbon buildup, because carbon is going to be the enemy of smooth, frictionless movement. And anywhere we see any other kind of dirt or grease or grime as well, this carbon destroyer is supposed to break down all kinds of those organic materials. Marcus from Modern Spartan Systems even tells me that this stuff will attack and dissolve cosmoline, which is notoriously difficult to remove from firearms. So I'm excited to see if that's true, because this could become a do-all cleaning solvent for those situations. So we're going to start by using a copper bristle brush. Now, like I said, you normally wouldn't clean from the muzzle, so I'm just going to try to do this carefully. And the objective is to push through the bore all the way through. You never want to go halfway, stop, and then pull it back out. So we're going to push all the way through the bore and let the copper bristles try to pull away the carbon that's stuck in the rifling. And we're going to pass this a couple of times, and then we'll pass a clean, dry patch to see what rubs off on it. So we're going to run a patch through here and just see what comes out. Now, this is not the tightest fitting patch for this barrel. I seem to have lost the exact jags for the .38 caliber, so this isn't recommended. But we're going to use what we have and just see. And it looks like the patch comes out fairly black, which means that we are removing some deposits. So I've just run a couple patches through until they came out dry, and I don't have a good bore scope, or else I would show you, but the inside of the bore is nice and shiny bright now, so I have high hopes for what the rest of this is going to look like. Now it looks like the carbon destroyer has dried a little bit, so I'm going to apply a little more, and then I'm just going to use your average $1 drugstore toothbrush and scrub a little bit and see what we can remove here. So as we can see, the back strap has a very rough, porous surface where the carbon has really started to cling. So it is coming away, but that's going to be a little more stubborn. I don't know if I'm not applying enough of the carbon destroyer or not letting it sit for long enough. We're going to apply a little more and focus on another area, and then we're going to come back and see what happens with this after it's been sitting for a couple minutes. See, it does look like it is slowly starting to pull away. The instructions do state to reapply as needed, so maybe it's expected that this will take a couple applications to pull out the really old crusted carbon that you find sometimes. Let's take a look. And every time we do apply it, you can see that the layers do start to move. So it looks like it's definitely getting in, and it looks like we just have deeper areas of carbon that are going to be more stubborn and take longer to remove. So I'm going to keep applying the carbon destroyer to this area in between working on the other areas of the gun to see how it performs overall. Another place we've applied it is the front of this cylinder here. I'm just applying a little more, but we've let this sit here for a couple minutes as well. So let's see if we encounter the same situation here. And it looks like what it's done is easily removed the surface layers of carbon, and it looks like it's left us with a ring where the carbon is etched deeper into the metal, where that's going to take a little more convincing to remove. So overall, so far, that seems to be a common theme. So we're going to see what it takes to get out all this old carbon. So in addition to letting this sit for a couple of minutes, I've switched to a different brush. This is a karting brush, stainless steel from Brownells. This is commonly used for removing rust in rust bluing, and I also used it in the video where I removed rust from the Mauser HSC. I didn't want to go straight to this because it is a little more aggressive, but the bristles are soft stainless steel, so they should remove more of the fouling without damaging the finish on the gun. So we can see now, with that being a little more aggressive, how much of the carbon we've really cleaned up here. So I think one or two more applications and we'll really have it there. So I think the trick to this is a good stiff brush. If I were going to do this again, I would go with a set of copper bristle brushes like the one we used for the bore. And you definitely want to let the copper destroyer sit in without letting it dry. So that seems to be the other trick to getting this to work, but now it seems like we're really making progress. So we're going to do one more application of this, and I have a feeling the top strap is going to clean up. I don't know if you can see, but it really looks like the machine finish on the top strap from the factory had enough grooves that the carbon could get deep inside the metal and really cling, and that's where we're going to have problems removing it because it's not just sitting easily on the surface of the steel. Of the carbon deposits getting smaller and smaller, so it is working its way away. I think this is another case where we're going to have to do a couple applications and really let it sit to work. Your normal gun cleaning will not be like this. This is kind of a more extreme case. One thing I will say is that this is where an ultrasonic cleaner would really come in handy because the vibrations, I think, would really help break up those carbon particles. And the carbon destroyer is actually recommended for use in an ultrasonic cleaner. So while I haven't tried that because I don't have access to one, I have a feeling that this would do a really good job breaking up the carbon if we did have it in a cleaner like that. So that's something to think about. So that's after one application that we let sit and went at it with the steel brush. You can definitely see where before there was a lot of buildup. This is a nice white clean surface, so this seems to be working a lot better for us now. So we're going to go at this top strap again. It's been soaking for a couple of minutes. Sorry for all the vibrations and everything, moving everything around. Love to be back on a stable workbench, but you work with what you have. Definitely all the way around I'm seeing that carbon start to come off, and I'm seeing the nice bright white steel that we want to see, so that's a good sign. Every time we do this, it is starting to look more and more like we have a new revolver again. This is a nice lint-free gun cloth, by the way. It's a good cloth for gun cleaning because it doesn't grab or tear easily and it doesn't leave any deposits behind. So it's really great for picking up the fouling and any oil or loose solvents. So where we are now, it's almost all cleaned up on the top strap, and we're starting to make good progress on the breech face. The end of the barrel still needs a little work, so instead of showing all of that, I'm just going to keep applying and keep reworking this, and we'll come back and show you what it looks like when we're done and about how long it took us to get there. Using a little more of this stuff than I anticipated, I think what might be smart to do next time is actually to get an eyedropper or something like that and put some of the chemical in there so you can really control where you drop it, because that seems to be a better way of putting it on than transferring it from a cloth. This stuff seems to work best when you leave a little puddle of it to start to work. What I'm doing now is most of the flutes have cleaned up, and we have these small stubborn spots that don't really want to come out. So I'm using a cheap aluminum dental pick, and it's sharp enough to get in there and scrape away the buildup without damaging the finish of the metal. So when we have little pieces of buildup like this, we can use it just like a dentist would use it to come in and scrape plaque. And we're just going to break up those carbon deposits that are in there and lift them. And then we'll come here and wipe them away. And those are starting to look pretty nice and clean. We're almost done with those. These scrapers are great tools for gunsmiths, mostly for removing built up deposits of any kind, but they can also be used to help orient pins and capture springs and things like that. So for as cheap as they are, it's definitely good to keep a pack around. So the flutes, nice and clean now. Much better than they were when we first got them. There might be a couple places I'm going to go back and hit real quick, but these are starting to look nice and shiny again. We're going to come here and hit the back of the barrel again. This is a place where you're going to see a lot of buildup because the bullet is leaving the cylinder and then it's got a short gap before it hits the barrel. So anything that's coming behind the bullet is going to be exposed. As well, if your timing is even a little bit off, you could be shaving small amounts of lead or brass, copper, from the bullet. So we could be seeing that type of buildup here too. So again, I'm not at all too surprised that this is really where some deep, difficult buildup is. This is going to take some time to work on, but it is really coming along, so we'll keep working at that. So we're finishing up here, and one thing that I'm seeing that I haven't seen is there's a little buildup here on the right side of the barrel extension, and it's different from the buildup I've been seeing. It's kind of flat, kind of bubbly, a little bit shiny. Now I don't know what would be the case for that getting there, but to me it looks like lead, and since I suspect that it's some kind of lead buildup, maybe the timing is off and somebody's been shooting wad cutters. I don't really know what the case is, but I am going to try another product I have over here, which is the copper and lead destroyer. So this is the same idea as the carbon destroyer, but formulated for removing copper and lead. So I'm going to put a little of that directly on the buildup, and I'm going to see what happens if it becomes easy to scrape that away. Now I'm going to put some on the end of the barrel too, and I'm not going to worry about getting any in the bore because this is designed for removing copper and lead from the barrel also. So we're going to run some patches through the barrel and then we're going to oil it at the end. And just like we've done with everything else, we're going to want to let that sit for just a couple minutes and keep working on some other pieces. So we're going to go after this buildup here now and just see if it scrapes away, which I have a feeling it will. It definitely seems to be some type of a solid deposit that's stuck on there, which is strange to me, but it is coming away. It seems like I got most of the mass away, so I'm going to continue scrubbing here. See what that achieves for us. So now we've spent probably about a total of an hour cleaning parts. We can see where there was a big carbon buildup before. We have nice, smooth, white surfaces. So that's going to reduce our friction, and it should be easier for all these parts to work together. So definitely, after a couple of decades of not being cleaned, this gun is already in a much better state. And being clean, it's going to allow us to more accurately assess what might be a problem with it. Now, a couple of things that I did notice that I want to address. If you look at the notches for the cylinder stop, and they probably won't show up on camera, but each of these notches has a small rolled up burr that's actually going to be dragging on the cylinder stop. Now, this could be through normal use, or it could be through rough handling, poor practices like spinning the cylinder and then slamming it shut and things like that could be causing extra force on these cylinder notches where the edges are rolling over. So to fix that, I'm going to take a small ceramic slipstone from Spyderco. These were made, I think, more for polishing knives, but they're very useful for stoning and fitting gun parts and removing small burrs like this. So I'm just going to locate where I think the burr stands proud, and I can feel it with a fingernail there. And I want to very lightly, just really lightly, pass the stone back and forth over it to clean up the burr a little bit. Now please don't do anything like this if you're not sure of what you're doing and exactly how the geometry of any part can affect the function of the gun. We're not moving much material, but by polishing we are removing metal. And this really becomes important when you talk about things like the sear and hammer interface in these guns. So if you don't know if what you're polishing is a critical part and you don't know how to polish it, don't, and take it to a gunsmith. Now the goal here is not going to be to completely remove any burr in some cases, because some of these might be too big to stone down, but I'm definitely going to want to smooth over any sharp edges and blend them as much as I can, because this is going to reduce friction on the cylinder stop. I'm going to very gently continue like this. Now if I weren't showing for a camera, I think the best way to do this would be to lock the cylinder down in a vise with soft jaws, where you have good support and you can very accurately do your polishing strokes. So I've cleaned up the pins, I've cleaned up the edges on the end of the cylinder stop notches. A couple of other areas I've identified that are a little rough that I'm just going to try to smooth over. On the support here, where the cylinder rolls over into the frame, it looks like there's a little more evidence that the gun may have been handled a little roughly. There is definitely some steel that's rolled over at the edge here. So with the same philosophy, I'm going to go and try to smooth over those edges without removing too much material or changing the geometry of any parts there. So here I've taken the slipstones that I showed earlier, and there were some burrs on the very edges of this piece of metal right here. This is where the cylinder contacts when it's rolling back into place in the frame. So by smoothing out these edges, we're hopefully going to contribute to a very smooth action. In this case, what I'm doing is just what I would call remedial work. It looks like these edges have been slightly damaged, so all I'm doing is polishing and very slightly rounding those edges back over, because really this is just a cleaning and inspection and repair kind of job. If I were building a custom revolver, this is one area where I might want to pay attention to very carefully changing the shape of this and rounding over all the edges to make sure you always get a smooth action that's more difficult to damage in this way. The last place that I'm going to very carefully take a stone is on the back of the barrel here, and the only reason is where the carbon fouling was showing before, there were a couple of spots that were rubbed white, and what this means is as the cylinder was coming back around, there were a couple slightly high spots on the back of the barrel that were contacting the cylinder where the rest of it wasn't. So I'm just going to very gently come at this with a square stone. I'm just looking for high spots to remove, and I'm not trying to change the shape of anything. So again, this is another case where you want to be cautious of what you're doing, and if you don't know what you're doing or why, just don't do it until you know that you need to. So I've polished away as much as I want to polish right now, which is really not much, and I'm seeing where it's rubbing in the high spots, and I haven't made full contact all the way across. This is a candidate for something I might come back to if I'm still having issues, but for right now all I wanted to do was smooth out some of the high spots and then see how everything functions when it's put back together. So with all of this done, it's all cleaned up, all of the spots that look like they need attention have been addressed. I'm going to oil everything, and we'll see how it functions right now. Now regardless, we're still going to get inside the gun later and take a look and make sure everything looks good inside, but we want to see if the problems that we've been seeing have been addressed or at least made a little bit better by what we've done. So what I'm going to do now is use the Modern Spartan Systems Accuracy Oil. This is probably the most interesting product that they have with some of their more unique claims. So what I've been told by Marcus is that this is a lubricant that works with a form of what he would call nanomolecules suspended in the oil itself. So it's not just a lubricant. In fact, the lubricant is kind of a delivery system for the proprietary chemicals they have in here. And it actually is supposed to be kind of a treatment, so it's supposed to absorb a little bit into the metal and leave it smoother, easier to clean, and create less friction. So, like I said, this is a test. I haven't used this yet, so we're going to see how this works. And we're going to see if it does the things that it says it does. In theory, it should work a lot like a Teflon or molybdenum coating, where we're reducing friction and making it easier to clean. But Marcus has told me while the chemicals are proprietary, it's not anything that's on the market. So it's not a Teflon, it's not a molybdenum, it's something new. And that's what makes it kind of interesting and unique to see if it lives up to those claims. So this is a new, never used 9mm chamber mop. So instead of a patch, I'm going to use this to distribute the oil. I think we're going to get a little better dissemination that way. So I just gonna apply some of this to the mop. Now, the interesting thing I noticed is a lot of gun oil is very heavy and thick. This isn't. This is kind of watery, maybe a little bit like a vegetable oil. And that's something I've heard a lot of other people say, and that just has to do with the formulation of the chemical, which is supposed to distribute the nanomolecules inside of it. So yes, I am getting this kind of soaked. Don't know how much of this to use, so we're going to apply it and if we have too much extra, we're just going to wipe it away. And one thing I will say is with all of these products, I have not noticed any harsh odors or vapors or smells. A lot of this stuff makes you want to do it outside because of how noxious it is. But all of this stuff is very friendly. Doing this inside the apartment with the AC off, and I haven't noticed any buildup, no headache, nothing like that. And that's by design, but that's something that I really like in a cleaning chemical. So I just want to let that saturate a little bit. And then on all of the other pieces, I'm going to wipe away the excess a little bit. And actually, I'm just going to kind of rub in a thin film. Just put a drop there, and we'll see. I have a feeling that that little drop is going to coat this whole piece and then some. And really that's the case with most gun oils and even a lot of machine oils. You don't need as much as you think you do. One drop will cover a lot more than most people think. And then the inside of this, again, just gonna do a little drop, spread it around a little bit. There's tools for this, and I might choose, to use a Q-tip or something like this, but I'm really not afraid of just rubbing this in by hand. It's not going to hurt anything, and it's just an easy way to apply. And they do recommend that you actually treat the whole gun, including the trigger assembly and any other moving parts. So when we take a look inside the gun, we're going to look at any places that we might find it appropriate to lubricate with this, especially with the rebound in these guns is one common cause of a heavier trigger pull. So we're going to smooth that up a little bit and maybe apply a little of this to the rebound slide. So now that that is all done, we're going to take the yoke and slide it back over the extractor rod, like so. We're going to line up the yoke with the slot in the frame, drop it into place, just like that. Now, like I said before, this gun did not always act up, but we're going to see, so far the function seems pretty good. So far, I seem to be 100% trouble-free on this gun, which could mean that the error here was a binding between the cylinder and the barrel. Now, there's a slight gap there. That's what's known as cylinder gap, and it's possible that with all of the buildup on there and the high point that we saw, along with the rotation of the cylinder, that in some places the cylinder would bind and prevent further rotation, which would prevent further movement of the trigger. But we are still next time going to take a look in here. We're going to replace the transfer bar hammer safety that was taken out, and we're just going to make sure everything's in good working order there. And then once that's done, we're going to take it to the range, put a couple boxes of rounds through it. If everything looks good, it'll be on its way back to the rightful owner. So thanks for watching this. If you have one of these guns, I hope this helped you out a little bit, and if not, I hope you just enjoyed looking at a nicely built revolver, getting it cleaned up from its old status back to almost in the hands of the shooter again. Remember to follow the channel, because next time we are going to take a look inside. We're going to replace some of these boogered screw heads, tighten the thumb release, and generally get this back to fine working order. Like I said before, if you are a reader, follow my website, potsprecision.com. I'm going to compile all of this into a blog post, and when that's done, I'm going to link it in the videos. So remember to subscribe to the channel, and I hope you enjoy the next video as much as you enjoyed this one.